Welcome, everyone, to the C-Suite Marketing Perspectives podcast. I'm Steve McDonald, and today we've got Jolene Abbott. Now, Jolene, you've got a really interesting transition in your career, right? You moved up to the role of Chief Marketing Officer, and then you moved into the CEO role, and you had your own startup, and the whole team, funding and everything, and there was so much from that perspective of being a CMO, then being a CEO, and reflecting back on that and the takeaways. So that's what we want to talk about here today. But I'd first love to have you maybe get a little bit more into your background and tell us a little bit more than that light introduction.
Steve, it's so great to be here, and thank you very much for having me on. I did talk to everyone about it. But yeah, I'll just back up a little bit, as you said. So I've had an interesting career that was also quite planned out in the sense that I knew that I wanted a lot of different experiences. So instead of kind of following, well, I did stay for the most part in that marketing track, I wanted to work within a lot of different organizations because ultimately, around in college, I knew I wanted to be a leader. And whether I was the CEO of a company or started my own, I had always known that that was my ultimate goal. And that was what was exciting to me. And I think a lot of that stemmed from, conversations with my father and him being such a wonderful role model for me in business. So when I started out my career, I wanted to learn and gather as much experience as possible. So I started out in the agency world, which I think is one of the best ways to cut your teeth. It is really tough. It moves incredibly fast. And if you're young and hungry and you want an enormous amount of experience and responsibility quickly, working for an agency, I think, is an incredible experience. For me personally, I wanted to be able to go in-house. So after I worked in PR marketing agencies, working with fantastic clients across the board in various things, from luxury goods to consumer products to startups, that's actually where I started getting that bug for the startup culture was via exposure at my agency, kind of life. I wanted to be in-house and I wanted to be the decision makers. For those who worked at agencies, sometimes I don't know on the other end of that table who's making that call. And
Yes.
So I had the opportunity to move over to Skechers, which is multi-billion-dollar global footwear company. At the time, they were the second largest footwear company in the US. So very huge. And I think that also a lot of people didn't realize that. I will be honest, I didn't realize how big they were and the growth that they were going through. And that was an amazing opportunity to be able to work with the founder and CEO. It's a family-owned company, but also a massive, like a multi-billion-dollar global company. That was an amazing experience where I got a lot of exposure to like, okay, this is how a big organization works and all of the different things inside. And then from there, I was like, okay, I've done agency life, I've done big global company, and now I want to go to a startup. So I went to a startup called Ember and joined on their marketing team as they were starting to formalize the marketing team and build this consumer product startup, not from day one, but pretty early on, and really watch it just flourish and grow into an incredible company. And I ended up taking the head of marketing and e-commerce role after my predecessor had resigned to go start a company. It really is the startup bug. And it's just all part of my following my curiosity. You start kind of checking these like experience boxes, for me at least. And I then had that dream opportunity came true. And I was like, this is my chance to now go be the founder and CEO of a startup. And so I was actually hired by a parent company to launch a new brand. And so the nice, beautiful part of that is that if there's any founders listening, is I did have support. So it wasn't just me. I did have a parent company offering resources and support. So that was amazing. I had to make that, as we kind of have talked about, that leap. And it was a leap, not only, going from just a whole career in marketing, even though I knew I liked all of the different facets of an organization and knowing kind of my end game of wanting to really hold that top leadership role. As I look back and reflect, I started seeing how I was preparing myself for that role. And I didn't quite realize it at the time at Ember. So I was really interested in sales and worked very close with the sales team and very heavily involved in all of the go-to-market and the retail sales, wholesale. And then I ran e-commerce. But even like product development and really understanding that piece, fundraising. So I started laying all of the breadcrumbs for myself when I was at Ember. And maybe consciously or subconsciously, I knew that. But until I kind of stepped back and really reflected, I'm like, oh, I see, like all of this was laddering up and I was just gathering more tools while working at Ember. So really helped prepare me for that leap of going from the marketing e-commerce role to owning all aspects of a company and being responsible for all the different facets, which definitely is a bit of a leap, but it was exciting.
Well, and I think that's what's really interesting here, whether it's B2B, B2C, taking that responsibility and how do you take that responsibility and then grow a company, right? Grow a team, mentor a team, bring in culture, these are things that sometimes we don't think are important, right? We think
Yeah.
about our go-to-market strategy, we think about our ICP, we think about, right, you know, how are we actually going to make money in this business, which are incredibly important. I interviewed two folks. One was the CRO of the year and his CMO, and they literally attributed 50% of the success of the company to their culture and
Yeah.
how that
Yeah.
fostered just not only accountability, but responsibilities. And people loved coming to work. They loved what they were doing. And so they loved to contribute, right? And you just
Yeah.
get so much more out of them, and everybody's happier. And so that's one of the things. I know there's a number of kind of lessons learned, right, from
Yeah.
making this transition, but culture is a big one of them, I know, for you. Talk to us a little bit about
Absolutely.
growing teams, mentoring teams, creating culture, and what your perspective is and what actually happened.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I love that statistic that the CRO mentioned because I could not agree more. Like, full stop. I think it's something that I knew from the very beginning was going to be like the backbone of the company. And a lot of it comes from experience. I'm sure a lot of us all here, we've worked for different organizations with good culture, some maybe not. and, and for me, I am a consummate learner. I'm always observing. And it's something I at first didn't realize was a personal superpower of mine because sometimes I would be a little bit more quiet. And I realized I'm like, I am just sitting here observing and I'm taking in everything. I'm watching. I'm watching how, leaders are leading and how people are engaging. And I realized that observation quality that I have is actually one of my biggest superpowers, but it's not something that's generally applauded in business or highlighted when you read things about what makes a good leader. It's not someone who's like sitting back and quietly observing. But I will argue that what that did for me is it allowed me just to see like how organizations run and how people work within them. And I talk to people too and understanding really what works. So when I got this opportunity from day one, I'm like, okay, I want to build a really strong culture, but not a buzzword. It's something that actually means something. And as I've been able to reflect on this, I have a whole new perspective and I actually highly dislike the word culture because I think it's an overused buzzword and people don't know what it means at all. And I think if we were in a room or if we could somehow poll our audience right now with a raise of hands, I'd be so curious to see who could describe their company culture. And if they could, I think you could possibly get a different response from every single person because it's such a personal thing. And then we have all of our filters and everyone's understanding it different. And so when I was running the company and leading, I collaborated with the team. It was not, yes, I had my ideas of what I think would experience and make a really strong culture, but we got in person. I love a whiteboard. People make fun of me, but I still love a whiteboard. And we sat in a room and we talked about it and we brainstormed, but we really talked about not just like all of these fancy words, of what sounds good. And I think that's people's instinct. And I'm going to say that probably happened in the beginning. But for me, one of the most important things is to define what that word means because it can mean something different to every single person in the room. So if you say we value community, what does that mean exactly? Is it our community as ourselves, our employees, the community within a company resides? Is it, our clients or our customers? Like, what does that actually mean? And I think that gets really overlooked. And so I think it's great to brainstorm, but then you actually have to take it many steps further. You have to define what those words mean to you all, and then how are you going to live that value as you're starting to create culture as an organization? For me, one thing I said is like, when things get tough, how does this play into our organization? Because as you're starting a company, it's tough and it's grueling and people are stressed. And so we would have practical examples. And we had real examples of, okay, we're working with this vendor and things are going wrong. How do we handle ourselves in their situation based off of our values, based off of our company culture? So we were running through all of these scenarios in a room. So that way everyone understood what it meant. It was exhilarating and collaborative. And it was, for me, like incredibly fun. And we got everyone's opinions. And then we started kind of hashing out how we were all treating each other and how we plan to treat each other and also all of our vendors. And something that's really important to me is it's not just internal, it's also how you reflect the company and the brand and how you treat all of your partners, especially when things go wrong. What kind of company are we going to be?
Do you have any example? Because that's fascinating, right? Like when something goes wrong, how do we handle it? We meet people and we're like, wow, if I could just handle adversity the way that person does, right? When we see it, we know like, okay, I'm not doing that. I gotta get some more of this. What are some examples of some of the parameters you put around you? Say, okay, when this happens, this is how we want to be able to respond to this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think I'd have to go back now. One example is like I think I mentioned we had a vendor that we were working with and things were going wrong as they happen. I think the deadlines were getting missed and things weren't going as smoothly as we wanted. I think there's a reaction that some people just get really frustrated and go in with like force and go in and be like, we're the client, you need to do this. And I'm like, how in the world is that going to motivate them? Is that going to motivate the vendor to do everything in their power to make this work for you? I mean, maybe in some cases, yes or no. But for us, I'm like, that's not who we are. We can get things done by being this value of like kindness, of being good humans. And we can still get the end result that we want and maintain a relationship. And I will say, so we use that as one example, like how are we going to approach this as a team? And yes, you have to be direct and clear, but not just berating someone because half the time it's not even their personal fault. There's all these different things at play. Ultimately, everything got delivered and everything worked out. And we, not only that, we maintain an incredible relationship with this vendor who to this day, was opening doors for us for potential investors down the road. And so I was like, that was a perfect example to me to show how like we realize like we're not going to be a company who's just going to kind of steamroll over people. And how do we make sure that we're like getting the work done, but also treating people with kindness and respect? And that's something that everyone in our room and in the company truly, and something that I also truly value. And that's how we want to show up, and it's how we want to do business, especially when things are just falling apart and going wrong.
What's really interesting about that and how you react dictates in a lot of ways how others are going to react back to you, right?
Yeah,
You
right.
tend to think to the lowest level, right? Interacting with. And one of our clients is a very senior sales leadership coaching company. And they train the sales leaders to not just jump in, like you'll be reviewing a call or something like that. And they just want to jump in and like, no, you shouldn't have done this. This is what you should have said, right? Instead, taking a step back and saying, what did you think? How do you
Yeah,
think this, right?
yeah,
What would you do?
yeah,
And all of a sudden, they're so much more open. The people that are getting coached are so much more open because A, they're not getting yelled at, right? They're not feeling like they made mistakes. They're feeling more like, well, no, this is an opportunity to learn. And if they're bringing it up, then all of a sudden it's like they're that much more open to make change as a result of it. It's a
right.
collaboration, right? It's not a,
Exactly.
so that's kind
Exactly.
of what I was feeling that I was getting from your
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. Another piece of that, and this is a little outside of our company culture. I always viewed because, as a startup, you work with a lot of vendors. You can't afford to hire internally for every single role. So most of the company is outsourced in the early days for a while. And it's tough. You're constantly working with other teams who have different organizations and different cultures. And for me, from day one, and I think that's what also made me a big success throughout my entire career, is I've always viewed every vendor or partner or as a true extension of a company. So as an extension of my team. it was never an us versus them. And I remember having this conversation with one of my previous ad agencies when we were doing campaigns, and even the digital ad, my digital marketing agency. And the feedback was always like how much easier it was to work with me and my team versus other clients because I brought them in. I'm like, let's go through, here are our financial goals for e-commerce. Let's bring you in together. We've got to meet this and let's set this together versus like, okay, you just need to meet this. It really became, how would I treat them if they all work directly for us or with us on our team versus that kind of vendor client relationship. And I've seen enormous success, and you create deep partnerships, you create more collaboration. And so for me, there really was no kind of wall between us. No, you're part of the team. You're essentially my in-house team. And I think that was a huge takeaway, and it's worked really well through all of my marketing career, but also in this new role when I was the CEO, because we had so many vendors. I'm like, let's do this together. Let's problem solve together. Let's come up with solutions. And then, like you said, you find these organizations so much more excited to work with you because they know what to expect and they want to see your success as well. They want to see you grow because they're seeing, oh, I'm helping them. I had a hand in this. I was part of this process. That actually is another like big one, is bringing people into the process, not only for vendors, but also your team. And that's something that I see a lot of organizations struggle with, and a lot of leaders really struggle with that. When there's tough conversations, when there's layoffs, when things are going awry or something's going on, a lot of leaders close the doors and they don't explain why. So they might give tough news, but they're not bringing their team as part of the process. And if you hired them in the first place, they are probably talented and smart. Why would you not give them the benefit of the doubt and not bring people into the process and help them understand here's why? And that is another huge takeaway. If you want to decrease friction within an organization when you're going through a tough time, bringing your team as much as you can, whether it's the whole company, as much information as you truly can share, bringing them into the process and continuing that conversation of here's the bad news or here's what we need to do, and here's why. Here's why we need to do it. That alone immediately I have found helps to kind of disarm people, and then they understand. They're like, oh, I see what's happening. Because if you don't do that, I guarantee what happens is people will then come up with their own conclusions. And it's probably not going to be nearly as nice as what the reality is, right? Because people talk, employees talk. I remember kind of news being shared in the different roles I've had, and then everyone jumps on Slack or text message usually, and they're all the gossip starts and this and that, and making assumptions, assuming why an organization's making a decision, and or people being frustrated, and why would you want to start that when you could just create a culture of like, here, we're going to openly communicate, we're going to be really open, and we're going to share what's going on and explain and bring you along with us.
If you define the word team, right, it's somebody that's highly involved. And if you're not, obviously you can't share absolutely everything, right? But there is a degree of transparency that people just really appreciate, right?
Yeah.
And especially if you share the things that are the good and the bad. Right?
Yeah.
Because nobody expects everything's going to just go good. Nobody expects
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So if you develop trust and authenticity, there's like, look, guys, this launch didn't go the way that we wanted it. There were some really good things, and we think that, our next round or our second launch or whatever it is, right? Here's why we think we're going to be tremendously successful, but let's learn from what we did. If they're brought into that process, then all of a sudden, it's this idea that great ideas come from anywhere, right? At any level. But if they feel like they're a part of the process, like they're a valued part of the team, and they're being shared information that's valuable in order to make these decisions, it's amazing how much creativity and extra work, right? Like people are willing to work harder and go that extra mile if they feel like they're being treated as somebody. Like you mentioned earlier, not treating your agencies like a vendor. No outside source wants to be a vendor. They all want to be a partner, right?
Yeah.
But even with using that term vendor in your world as agencies, and I started in agencies myself, and hearing the word that we're being introduced as our vendor, it was always like, kind of dirty.
Cringe.
You know?
Yeah, and you're on the outside. You're the
Yes.
outsider. You're also the scapegoat that everyone can blame when you're an outsider too.
Yes, exactly.
Maybe that's why. Um, yeah, I mean, I love the word partner, but there is still kind of an us and them. And I think I've taken it a step further. I'm like, no, you're part of the team. I really see you. No, really not that different than our hired employees because you're part of the team. And that changes everything. So I think even taking that step further beyond partner, because there's still this kind of us, them, versus like, no, we are all part of the exact same team doing this together. And it was a game changer. And to this day, I'm so close with all of my previous agencies. I've worked with teammates. We've supported each other. When I was, you know, starting the company and I needed support, I had an enormous amount of people I could call and lean on and get answers and help and support from for free because I cultivated these really deep, authentic, meaningful relationships because I cared. And I didn't ever view them as just a disposable partner or agency that we were going to probably throw to you for the next few years because you never know where people are going to land. But it's kind of interesting. It seems so obvious, right? But we forget that, or we get kind of caught up in corporate language, and so sometimes we just need reminders of these things.
So tell me a little bit about, because this is CEO, right? And you had parent company resources and parent company expectations on performance.
Yeah.
This balance of spending time, dedicating time to think through company culture and scenarios and how it's going to play out. Was this ever part of a board level discussion? How did this balance work between, okay, you got the resources, and especially today as money comes at a much higher cost where money was freely spent. But how does that balance play out as a CEO where you have to, bottom line, you're not even going to be a business, right? Unless there's performance in the business. So that has to be top priority.
Absolutely. That is such a great question. I think there really isn't a lot of balance necessarily. It's a tough question. I think a lot of that sacrifice did lay on my shoulders as far as time. As far as there was only one of me to go around, and you're getting kind of pulled in a ton of different directions, and every single person pulling you to them. That's the most important thing. And that's something I think we all need to remember. It's like to that other person, like their thing is the most important to them. Whereas like you're trying to prioritize and trying to, meet all of those different demands. So I will say, especially in the early days when you're setting the tone of the company, it is going to be, pretty exhausting. You're going to have to allocate an enormous amount of time because there's no substitute for that when you're building culture and hiring people, and it's all remote, and I'm trying to build rapport and get to know my new team and build a team. We're all strangers, it's brand new, trying to kind of like what's that glue. So I will say it's really tough, but it's for me a non-negotiable. And so if it's going to be a few extra hours, I was working with most everyone was East Coast, I'm West Coast, 6, 7 a.m. meetings on a very regular basis. I'm willing to do that because that's so important to me and they're important to me, and it's a long game. But once you've really invested that time early on and you have that rapport and trust, it will only set the foundation and make your job and your working relationship so much easier. So, one thing I instilled very quickly is, office hours, so to speak, where being back in school again, I was like, this is my scheduled time with my team. This is for you. This is your time. It's an open door. This is not our going over your to-do list and your responsibilities. It is your time to talk to me. If you're struggling with something, if you're like feeling, I have been trying to, get through to this vendor and I just keep hitting a wall, or I can't, I'm struggling with this coffee. I just need some, like, where are your pain points? Or is it something completely else with the team? But for me, I'm like, I don't have an agenda. There's no to-do list. Like I said, it is your time to talk to me. And that adds a lot more meaning to your calendar.
Right.
But it was something that I never can move those meetings. It was the most valuable time of the week because that's how you're really getting to know each other, getting to know work style. And also my team knows that I'm there and I'm not going to just, it's not lip service, and I'm here to help. And at the end of the day, that's what, as leaders, you're there to serve the company, you're there to serve your team. And so how am I, from my perspective, I'm like, how can I be of service to make your job easier as well? So that way you can just take off and thrive and you don't need me as much. And when you do, you know that you can come to me versus, being afraid or trying to fix it yourself or suffering in silence, which some people do as they're trying to waste all this time figuring a solution to a problem. I don't want that. If you're really stuck, I don't want you burning all of your hours suffering trying to figure something out versus being afraid to come to me because you don't want to feel like you don't know what you're doing or you don't have a job, which has happened. Like it's observed this happening. So I just knew that that's not the organization I want. And it created this like incredibly tight knit group and tight knit team. And I wouldn't trade that for the world. But again, at that time, one of the team members told me how much it meant to them. They're like, you are so incredibly generous with your time. And that meant so much to see because it's not easy. So there's really no beautiful answer to that. It's going to be hard. It's going to take up, meaningful hours. You might have to squeeze it in between things. But it's the most important thing, I think, for me.
I mean, what I kept thinking about as you're talking is the balance is it worth the investment, right? That time.
Yeah. Right.
And
Yeah.
everything that you're talking about here, you're constantly investing in the team. And a good leader knows we're only as good as the team around us.
Yeah. Yeah. Always.
You can't do it on their own.
Yeah.
Right. So you
Yeah.
have to be able to lean on your team. You have to. And therefore, it becomes a no-brainer. This would be something to be talking about, at the board level is, no, we need to invest in our team. If we want performance out of this company, we need to be investing in our team. And we need to dedicate that, not just saying it as lip service, like culture. It just can't be words on a piece of paper, right? Like actions speak louder than words, right? Your time that you're spending with these people, just as I'm hearing it, just meant so much to them, right?
Yeah.
Because you invested in them.
And helping to grow their careers. I'm not naive. I'm like, this is not your last job. You're going to work other places. Like, how can we help you thrive in your own professional world? And so what does that mean to you? Like, what's going to make this job successful for you? That was always something I focused on. It was never like, how do I get the most out of you, to get this job done? It's like, well, how do we grow you and how do we help you thrive in your career and then set you up for success for whatever your next role is going to be? And I feel like that's something I'm so deeply, deeply proud of throughout my career and in this last role is I had one young woman who I hired. And it's again, a startup, you tend to hire, you can't have the big budgets to hire an enormous senior team. I had a phone call with her. On paper, did not have the skills for the job description. So like if it was like a LinkedIn job submission, would not have been even looked at because she did not have the experience for that role, but had the desire and the interest. And so we had a phone call and I could just see, I'm like, oh my gosh, she's going to be incredible. And yes, going back to time, it's going to take more time. It's going to take more of me. It's going to take more of me to help train her in more of the traditional marketing and branding functions. She had more of a PR background, but had a lot of other skills that I saw that would be so incredibly valuable. All the marketing you can learn a lot of these things, but she had a lot of other skills and had this strong passion and desire. And so I brought her on and, we worked very closely together. And in like less than a year, I saw her just thrive and be honest with me if there's something that she didn't like, the confidence started coming. I don't like this copy or we should do this. And then she started growing into this like, bigger leadership role. And it's amazing how fast it can happen. And so again, it's just setting that foundation and, she's incredibly successful and bright and has completely like shifted into this much broader brand marketer from more of that traditional PR role and became one of my right hands at the company.
If you can't get the team to want to take on the mountain, right, and charge behind you and give it their all, especially in the startup world, right? It's just not going to work.
No.
And I see this passion coming out, right? So
I love it. It really is. I mean, it just like warms my heart too, because for me, being able to help mentor and coach people to help them thrive in their career is one of my like biggest successes. Like you said, as a result, the company will do well and sales will be up. All of those things will do better when you have someone who like can't wait, who wants to see you as a leader too, to succeed as well. And so my team wanted to see me succeed. They also wanted to see the company succeed. Like this really meant something, and not just like I said, lip service. Like it truly meant something to all of us. If we were all invested, we're like, we are together building something and everyone's going to have a meaningful part. And as you said, like when I'm not available or if I couldn't be in a meeting, I knew that I fully trusted the person, from our company that was representing us on those phone calls or trying to negotiate something, like 100%. That's the goal. You can't continue to be in every meeting and be in every room. And then in the beginning, you are. But at the end of the day, for me, I'm like, how do I start to really empower everyone? And they have the confidence, but they also know that they can come to me. So, like I said, in the beginning, it is a lot of hours, and I would always continue office hours, and then maybe you can scale back, the frequency. So that's not something I would only do in the beginning. It's something I will always do. But at the end of the day, when you fully trust the team and they can walk into your room and represent you in the company, like what peace of mind. And then you start getting your hours back to focus on other things.
If there was one take that you wanted people to have from everything that we've talked about here, right? Because the human brain, we can't remember everything, right? But if we wanted to focus on what's the one most important takeaway that you wanted people to have, what would that be?
I think on the topic of culture, and as I said, I'm kind of working on something because I don't like this word anymore because I think it's lost its meaning in a little bit in our organizations. I would say if you are working on your company culture or if you haven't, go through and define every single term and then put it through the ringer with real life examples. I think for us as organizations and as CEOs and CMOs, it's on us. It's on us to do that for the organization so people understand it. Do an audit. Go through your values and your mission. Make sure, is this clearly defined, or are we going to have 5 different answers from 5 different people? And the best way to do that after you define it is to walk through real life scenarios. It's like any other training. So I would say revisit it and pull your team. Ask people, what does this mean? What does this value mean to you? And I think it'd be very, very, very eye-opening. And then you'll see you'll probably have a lot of work to do.
Well, one of the things that I'm thinking about too is that a lot of the folks that are listening are not at a startup where you're starting from scratch, right? You're saying, well, here's the culture.
Yeah.
And I interviewed on the podcast this wonderful CEO and CMO. She had been a CMO, went to a CEO, is now a CMO again. And she brought up the importance of symbolism. And she said she went into this company as the CEO, and there are all kinds of horrible things that had happened, and everybody was down. And what she did, she literally put a cardboard box on the table, and she had everybody write all the things that they didn't like about what had happened. They threw them into this box, and they lit it on fire.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
she said, what defined us before doesn't define us going forward.
Yeah.
So there is a way to, even in a company, even if you're coming in, or even just the culture within your team, your department.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
There is never a better time than now, no
Yes.
matter what stage you're at, right?
Yeah.
If you feel like there is opportunity to invest and create a different culture and create a better team dynamic, you can always do it.
Always, always. And it's hard at big organizations, but sometimes it's easy because you do have a framework of what's not working.
Right.
And people are very, very, very vocal. People are not afraid to speak their minds. And if they're not saying it to you as the CEO or CMO, they're saying it to their team members. So people are always talking. And so I think it's never too late. But I think it's a good time to do a value and to do an audit. And as we're all about, re-auditing our lives right now, the end of the year, going into the new year. What better time? And I know everyone's busy. And that's the thing. It always gets pushed to the wayside. Always, right? Because there's other things, budgets, things that are really very important. This will always, it's just like that fuel to your fire. It will make you a much better, more efficient, stronger, happier organization. There's really, but it is a deep audit, and making sure that it's clear. And then, and as a CEO, I would say that it's on you to live those values in the day-to-day reactions of how you interact with an organization. And if you don't, then all of this is just a waste of time. I'm going to say it, but if you don't actually, as the leader, lead that, and whether it is even your team, what's the point? It's just then it just becomes, again, a buzzword, and it's just a few Google slides. It doesn't mean anything unless you're actually living those values. So, yeah.
Well, Julie, if other people had additional questions and they wanted to get a hold of you, would it be appropriate if we gave them a link to your profile on LinkedIn? Would that be okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, very easy. Jolene Abbott. I'd love to connect with people. I can keep talking about this for hours and dissect and go deeper. So we just scratched the surface. So hopefully it just inspired some people listening to really take a hard look at it and realize that this is something that needs to be prioritized, that you push down on the to-do list.
Well, I think you accomplished that today. So thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing all of these insights. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. This was a lot of fun.